At our daughter's graduation, my wife whispered that she was leaving me, right before she planned to make it public. But what she didn't know was that I had the mic next, and the truth. What I revealed at that podium didn't just silence the room. It shattered the image she'd built for years. Welcome to Burnt Bridges Revenge, where betrayal meets bold revenge. This is the story of a man blindsided by betrayal on his daughter's proudest day, but what he did next silenced a crowd and changed everything. If you love true justice and stories that end with power, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This one's unforgettable. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains like golden ribbons, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful. I remember standing by the mirror, adjusting my tie, thinking how proud I was of our daughter, Alina. She was graduating with honors, and every step she had taken to get there was paved with late nights, hard work, and quiet resilience. I had watched her grow from a shy little girl into a confident young woman, and today, she would walk across that stage and step into a new world. I should have been smiling for that reason alone, but my smile, I later realized, was masking the edge of a storm I never saw coming. My wife, Rachel, was humming as she got ready beside me. She wore a crimson dress that turned more than a few heads that day, and if anyone had looked closely enough, they might have seen how perfectly her mask fit. To outsiders, we looked like a proud couple, a supportive husband and a radiant wife, celebrating their daughter's achievement. But behind those practiced smiles were secrets, the kind that rot a marriage from the inside out. Still, I didn't let on. I had made a silent vow that this day would be about Alina. Nothing else. We arrived early at the university hall. The place buzzed with excitement, graduates in their robes, families gathering for pictures, teachers giving final hugs. Rachel held onto my arm like everything was normal, even brushing imaginary dust from my shoulder as we stood for a family photo. Alina looked stunning in her gown, her cap slightly tilted to the right the way she always liked it. "This is the happiest day of my life," she said, eyes gleaming. I nodded and swallowed hard. If I had known what Rachel was about to do, I might have pulled my daughter aside then and there, told her the truth, and spared her the moment of betrayal that would mark this day forever. We took our seats near the front, reserved for the parents of honor graduates. Rachel leaned in close as the ceremony began. At first, I thought she wanted to whisper something sweet or emotional, the kind of comment couples make when their child achieves something incredible. But what came out of her mouth changed everything. "I'm leaving you, Daniel," she said, her voice like glass, sharp, fragile, and cold. "Right after this, I wanted you to know before the cameras catch your face." I blinked. At first, I thought I hadn't heard her right. Maybe my ears were playing tricks. "What?" I whispered. She smiled wide for the camera someone pointed our way. "After the ceremony, I'm done pretending. I'll be making the announcement at the reception. Everyone will hear it together." I stared at her as the crowd clapped for the opening speaker. My heartbeat quickened, not in fear, but in calculation. For months, I had sensed something was off. Late-night texts she'd hide, sudden coldness, and a vacation she'd needed alone to clear her head. I had asked questions, but she was clever, too clever. Or at least, she thought she was. I had never confronted her because I needed proof. Now, sitting beside her, I realized I didn't need to wait anymore. She had just given me her opening move, and it was time I played mine. I turned to the stage and applauded like the rest of them. Rachel clapped, too, her fingers brushing mine as if the whisper she just dropped meant nothing. The announcer called the first batch of graduates. We were halfway through the alphabet, so I knew we had some time. And in those next 20 minutes, while applause rose and fell and proud tears welled in the eyes of hundreds of parents, I planned my response, not just for Rachel, but for the audience she wanted to humiliate me in front of. As Alina's name neared, I stood and joined the crowd in cheering for every graduate. I wanted my daughter to see joy on my face, not suspicion, not sadness, not the rage boiling just beneath my ribs. She deserved that. She had worked too hard to have this moment tainted by her mother's ego or by the storm brewing inside me. When they called her name, I felt tears well in my eyes. Real ones. Alina walked with grace, pride, and that spark of determination she inherited from my side of the family. She smiled at us, waved, and then shook hands with the dean. Cameras flashed. My heart soared and cracked at the same time. Rachel leaned in again and whispered, after she gives her speech, "I'll make mine. Keep your composure. It's better for everyone." I smiled. I really smiled. Because what she didn't know, what she couldn't have predicted, was that the school had also asked me to say a few words right after Alina. A quick thank you as her father. I had helped sponsor a scholarship and mentored students over the years, so it wasn't out of place. Rachel thought she was setting the stage to embarrass me. But in her arrogance, she forgot something very important. This wasn't her stage, and the microphone was about to be mine. I don't remember the next few graduates who walked across the stage after Alina. I heard the names being read, the polite applause echoing around the hall, but my mind was focused on one thing. The whisper Rachel had just delivered like a knife across my throat. After she gives her speech, I'll make mine, she said, as if this was some twisted ceremony of her own. I sat there, rigid and silent, not because I was stunned, but because I had expected something like this. What I didn't expect was her timing. It was cruel, calculated, and cowardly. She wanted to ruin the very day our daughter would remember for the rest of her life. Rachel had always cared about appearances more than truth. That was the currency she dealt in: public praise, social media congratulations, and the illusion of a perfect life. When things began unraveling in our marriage, she didn't come to me. She didn't try to fix it. She started seeking attention elsewhere. Late-night texts with a coworker, secretive weekends away, and eventually, an affair with a man who thought hiding behind LinkedIn made him invisible. But he wasn't. None of it was. And while she polished her mask for the public, I'd quietly gathered every message, every receipt, every video. I didn't do it to hurt her. I did it because I knew she'd try to hurt me first. And she did. As the ceremony neared its end, the dean stepped up to introduce the valedictorian. My heart swelled again with pride. Alina. She walked to the stage, stood tall behind the podium, and began her speech. Her voice was clear, composed, and beautiful. She spoke about resilience, about overcoming doubt and pressure. She thanked her professors, her friends, and her family. She even looked at us, me and Rachel, and said, to my parents, who've stood by me through every late night, every stumble, every exam I thought I'd fail, you are my foundation. The crowd applauded. Rachel wiped a tear from her cheek, making sure others saw it. I clenched my fists under the table. As Alina wrapped up, the dean returned to the stage. And now, a special thank you from a father who has not only raised a remarkable student, but contributed greatly to this university. Please welcome Mr. Daniel Pierce. Rachel turned sharply. You didn't tell me you were speaking, she hissed. I stood slowly. You never asked, I said, and walked to the stage. The applause that followed me up felt like thunder, but it barely touched the storm in my chest. As I reached the podium, I took a moment. I looked at my daughter, her smile, her hope. Then I looked at Rachel, her eyes wide, not with admiration, but with the dawning realization that something had shifted. I want to thank you all, I began, for celebrating not just a moment, but a journey. Our children have worked hard, sacrificed, and grown. And today, they step into the world as graduates. I couldn't be prouder of my daughter, Alina. I paused, looking directly at her. You are the best part of my life. People clapped. Rachel smiled, perhaps thinking this would remain a safe speech. But I wasn't finished. And while this is a day of beginnings, it's also a day of truth, I continued. Because if our children are to enter the world with integrity, we must model it. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The room grew quiet. You could hear the subtle creak of chairs as people leaned in. For some time now, I've lived with the burden of a lie, I said, voice steady. Not mine, but one that was planted in my home, behind closed doors, in whispered messages and secret meetings. A betrayal that has lived in the shadows, even as we posed for perfect pictures. I saw Rachel shift in her seat. Her hands clutched her purse. I did not want this day to carry bitterness, I said. But I also will not let it be stolen by a false story about who walked away from whom. Or why. To those who may hear different versions of what happened after today, know this: truth doesn't whisper. It stands here. It speaks now. Rachel was now visibly pale. A few heads turned toward her. She reached out as if trying to signal for me to stop, but I didn't. I will not expose names. I won't show the messages, the recordings, or the photos. Not here. Not now. But I have them. And should they ever be needed, they will speak louder than anyone who tries to twist the story. I took one last look at Alina. This is still your day, sweetheart. Your future is not defined by anyone else's mistakes. And no matter what changes, my love and pride for you will remain. Always. I stepped back. The room was silent for half a beat, then thunderous with applause. Not polite, not rehearsed, but real. As I made my way back to my seat, Rachel stood, whispering furiously. You ambushed me. You're ruining everything. No, I said calmly. I just stopped pretending. By the time I returned to my seat, Rachel's face had changed entirely. The rehearsed elegance was gone, replaced by panic she could barely contain. Her lips were parted, her eyes darted around the room, and her hands trembled as she clutched her program with the grip of someone holding on to control for dear life. I didn't look at her directly. I just sat back, crossed my legs, and folded my hands calmly. I had said everything I needed to say without even mentioning her name. But the message had landed. She knew it. And more importantly, they knew it. The people around us didn't need an explanation. They had heard enough in my speech to sense that something was deeply wrong behind our picture-perfect life. Friends from her yoga group began whispering behind pursed lips. One of her co-workers who had been invited turned to glance at her with suspicion. Even the dean gave her a subtle side glance. And while Rachel seethed silently, stewing in the mess she had started, what she didn't know, what would break her even more, was that this was only the beginning. You see, I had been onto her for longer than she ever imagined. For nearly 9 months, I had watched her unravel our marriage strand by strand while spinning a web of lies just elaborate enough to keep suspicion at bay. But I'm not a fool. I had seen it before, in colleagues, in friends, even in my own parents once. When someone checks out of a relationship emotionally, they leave behind little breadcrumbs. Rachel had been dropping them for months. Missed calls she blamed on dead zones. Calendar appointments she didn't want me to see. Deleted text chains with someone saved as Kelly from HR, only I'd met Kelly, and Kelly was a 60-year-old woman who had retired 2 years ago. So I hired someone. Discreetly. A quiet PI with a clean record and a strict confidentiality policy. I didn't do it to catch her. I did it to protect myself. And it worked. In just 4 weeks, I had everything: photos of hotel meetings, dinner bills charged under aliases, and even an awkward video of her kissing a man in the parking lot of a restaurant she said she hated. I remember watching it once, no more. That was all I needed. I wasn't broken. I was clear. There was no coming back from that. But here's where it gets interesting. What Rachel didn't know was that I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was preparing a trap, and the trap was time. I waited for moments like this. I knew she was going to leave me eventually. Women like Rachel don't play long games unless they're winning. But the moment the script stops favoring them, they sprint for the door and rewrite the ending. So I let her believe she was still in control. I played the supportive husband. I took her to dinner. I even bought her a necklace for our anniversary, which she barely thanked me for. That night, she left early claiming a migraine. She wasn't even trying anymore. Alina knew something was wrong. My daughter has always been sharper than she lets on. A few weeks before the graduation, she caught Rachel in a lie. Something about where she had been one weekend. When Rachel gave her a vague answer, Alina came to me. I didn't want to burden her with the whole truth, but I told her gently, your mother is going through something, and we're trying to find a way to work through it. She looked at me with a sad smile and said, you're the only one who's trying. That moment told me everything. So I planned. I coordinated with the university to speak after Alina. I made sure my daughter had her moment in the spotlight. And then, when Rachel thought she would control the narrative, I took it from her without ever mentioning her name. I knew she would explode afterward. That was the point. As the ceremony ended and families began streaming out, Rachel grabbed my arm hard. We need to talk. Now, she hissed through clenched teeth. Not here, I said calmly. Unless you want more of an audience. She glared at me, but followed me quietly out to the parking lot. Her heels clacked like gunshots on the pavement. When we reached the car, she spun on me. What the hell was that? You were going to make a scene, I said. I simply made it first. You humiliated me. No, I replied. I exposed the space where you were planning to humiliate me. You just didn't think I'd be standing in it before you got there. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For a moment, the silence between us felt like a vacuum. Who told you? She finally whispered. Did he say something? I shook my head. He didn't have to. You left the trail yourself. I just followed it. Rachel's face flushed red. She reached for her phone, unlocking it with shaking fingers. We can fix this. We don't have to ruin everything. I laughed quietly. Not bitterly, just with the cold clarity of someone who had finally stepped out of a delusion. Rachel, you already did. I just refused to carry it any further. She stared at me, stunned. Then, for the first time, she looked small. Like the facade had finally cracked, and she wasn't ready for the woman underneath to be seen. I got into the car and started the engine. "You're just going to leave?" I looked at her. "You already did. Long before today." Then I pulled out of the parking lot, leaving her standing there as people walked by, whispering and staring, not at a perfect wife or elegant woman, but at a story she could no longer control. I didn't drive straight home after leaving Rachel in that parking lot. Instead, I parked 2 blocks away from a quiet coffee shop that overlooked the city skyline and just sat there, engine off, phone face down on the passenger seat. For the first time in what felt like years, the silence didn't bother me. It felt earned, clean. She had tried to ambush me during one of the most important moments in our daughter's life, and if I hadn't prepared for this moment, she might have succeeded. But she didn't know who she married. Not really. She thought I was the type of man who'd just take it, smile, shrink, walk away broken. What she didn't know was that I've always been 10 steps ahead. I just never needed to prove it until now. The setup had been months in the making. Rachel believed she had the upper hand because I never fought back. That was her first mistake. The second was thinking I didn't notice her late-night whispers in the guest room, the guarded calls labeled as client emergencies, the way she'd return home after her book club meetings smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. I noticed everything, and I said nothing. Because while she was busy crafting her escape, I was crafting the truth, and truth, when it lands right, doesn't need an explosion. It only needs precision. The speech I gave at Alina's graduation wasn't just spontaneous. I had spent weeks preparing it. I even rehearsed it with a close friend, someone who had gone through a very public divorce and taught me that silence only works when it's your choice. He told me, "If she's going to break you in public, you better be holding the script when she does it." That line stayed with me, so I took the mic before she could. I controlled the room. I told just enough of the truth to make her lie collapse on its own. But my preparation didn't stop with the speech. Weeks before the graduation, I called Alina aside and told her, carefully, gently, that things weren't right between her mother and me. I didn't go into the affair. I didn't poison her view of Rachel. But I made sure she knew that if anything strange happened during graduation, she could talk to me first. Alina took it better than I expected. She asked one question, "Are you okay?" I told her I would be, that I was just tired of pretending things were fine when they weren't. Her response stunned me. "I always knew," she said quietly. I blinked. Knew what? That mom was hiding something. She's been different. Like she's trying too hard to be perfect when we both know she's not. In that moment, I realized something important. My daughter didn't need me to be invincible. She needed me to be real. And that was the power Rachel never understood. She had always relied on image, while I relied on character. And character doesn't crack under pressure. It sharpens. I had also met with a lawyer. Quietly, I signed over certain assets and a trust for Alina, ensuring that no matter how messy things got, my daughter's future remained untouched. Rachel had no idea. She thought everything was still in both our names. But a few subtle changes, combined with proof of infidelity, would be enough to make sure she walked away with nothing more than her own guilt. And then came the final setup. I reached out to the university's alumni committee. Told them I wanted to sponsor a scholarship in Alina's name, something small but meaningful. They loved the idea. And as a token of thanks, they invited me to say a few words after Alina's speech. It was supposed to be a father's tribute. Rachel never bothered to ask why I seemed so calm the morning of the event. She didn't ask why I was up at 3 a.m. the night before, reviewing an old file on my laptop, or why I made a call to my lawyer just before we left the house. She was too focused on her moment, her plan to destroy me publicly and walk away with sympathy, maybe even admiration. But her arrogance was her undoing. Because while she thought she was scripting the final scene of our marriage, I had already rewritten the entire play. Even the friends she had invited, her inner circle of supporters, had unknowingly received messages from me days before the event. I sent polite notes. Just wanted you to know how proud I am of Rachel and Alina. I've prepared a small surprise for them both at the ceremony. Hope you'll stay after the speeches. No details, just enough to create tension. Enough that when the truth cracked open, they'd remember I had given them a heads up. I didn't want revenge, not in the traditional sense. I didn't want to see Rachel sobbing or begging or crumbling. I didn't want to ruin her life. I just wanted mine back. Without the lies, the shame, or the mask she made me wear every time we stepped into a room together. And now, with the setup complete, the fallout had begun. But I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was standing at the center of it, finally, as myself. That night, as the sun dipped low behind the skyline and the coffee shop lights flickered on, I got a message from Alina. Thank you for protecting my day. I don't know everything, but I know you did it for me. I love you. I stared at those words until they blurred. Because after everything, after the betrayal, the silence, the planning, the execution, the only thing that mattered was this. I hadn't lost my daughter. And Rachel? She had already lost far more than she realized. The night after the ceremony, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was restless, but because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Old friends, distant relatives, Alina's professors, even a few of Rachel's colleagues, all reaching out to say the same thing. I've never seen anything like that. They weren't talking about the graduation, the honors, or the speeches from faculty. They were talking about the moment when I stood behind the podium and stripped away the illusion without raising my voice, without naming names, without using a single insult. That silence, controlled, deliberate, spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. But it wasn't just them. Even strangers who barely knew us were texting, calling, commenting. My words had landed in a room full of educated minds, and the truth had echoed through every seat. The thing is, when someone's been painting a false image of you for years, the moment you pull back the curtain, people don't just see the liar, they see you clearly for the first time. And in that 10-minute speech, I felt more seen than I had in the last 10 years of marriage. But let me take you back to that moment. The podium. Standing there, the lights above me, the sea of faces before me, it should have been intimidating. It should have rattled me. But instead, I felt strangely calm. Not because I wasn't nervous, but because I knew exactly what I needed to say. I had waited long enough to speak the truth, and I had earned this moment through every quiet night, every fake smile, every moment I let her rewrite my dignity in whispers. I looked out across the audience and saw Alina, her cap now off, eyes locked on mine. She was seated beside Rachel, who sat too straight, too still. Her lips had thinned into a line of dread. Her fingers were knotted around her purse strap like it was the only thing anchoring her to the earth. My daughter, I said, is the kind of young woman every father hopes to raise, brilliant, brave, and beautifully grounded in truth. The crowd nodded and clapped, soft and supportive. And on a day like this, we celebrate accomplishments. But we also reflect. Because moments like these force us to ask, who stood by us to get here? And who pretended? The air shifted. Like something invisible moved through the crowd. Rachel blinked fast, her expression faltering. Life, I continued, is not measured by the smiles we wear for others or the pictures we post online. It's measured by the integrity we maintain when no one's watching, by what we choose to protect when our pride is tested. I could feel them listening now, not just hearing me, but listening. And Rachel? Her fingers now trembled. Some of you know me only as Alina's dad. Some of you know me through Rachel. Some of you have only seen the version of our family that we curated for events like this one. But what most of you don't know is that there's a deeper truth. A quieter story. One not written in captions or painted in smiles. Rachel began to whisper to Alina, but Alina shook her head slowly, not taking her eyes off me. And so today, I said, locking eyes with my daughter again, I want to honor more than just achievement. I want to honor resilience. The kind it takes to sit quietly while your heart breaks. The kind it takes to raise a child while someone else plots their exit. And the kind it takes to stand up here and say, not every perfect picture is real, and not every silent partner is weak. Gasps. Not many, but enough. The weight of my words began to land. I won't embarrass anyone. I won't shout. I won't point fingers. Because truth doesn't need to scream. It simply needs to be heard. I paused then, scanning the room. There was a stillness so thick you could hear a pin drop. And then one clapped. Then another. Then the room erupted. Not because I'd called someone out, but because I stood up. For myself. For the years I swallowed my voice to keep the peace. For the version of me that once believed love meant letting someone else rewrite your worth. When I stepped down, I didn't look back. I walked straight to Alina and hugged her. I'm proud of you, I whispered. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but she nodded. I know, Dad. I'm proud of you too. Rachel didn't speak. Not then. She stood frozen, lips parted, face blank. For once, she had no script. No performance. just silence. And as we left the auditorium, I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel anger. I felt release. The truth had been buried too long. Now it stood in the open, firm and unshakable. And everyone knew this wasn't a story of a marriage falling apart. This was a story of a man finally stepping out of the shadow of someone who never truly loved him. By the time the next morning arrived, my name had made its way into more conversations than I ever expected. Not because I was famous, not because I had shouted or exposed something scandalous, but because I had done what most people don't, stood up quietly, clearly, and unapologetically for myself. The power of that moment lingered, like the kind of silence you feel in a church after a powerful sermon. Everyone had heard it, and everyone remembered it. But no one could quite say out loud what they felt. That silence had spoken volumes. I sat at the kitchen table alone the next day, drinking black coffee as the early morning light slipped across the floor. The house felt bigger, emptier, but not in a lonely way. In a peaceful one. Rachel hadn't come home after the graduation. She sent a single message late that night. I think it's best I stay away for a while. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Her absence, once something that filled me with confusion and quiet resentment, now felt like clarity. She had made her choice. And so had I. Alina came downstairs around 9, her graduation cap in one hand and a bowl of cereal in the other. She looked at me, I still soft from sleep, and gave me a tired smile. "So, are we going to talk about it?" she asked, dropping into the chair across from me. I smiled back. "We can, if you want to." She stirred her cereal slowly. "I knew something was wrong between you and Mom. I didn't expect you to be the one to say it first." I nodded. Neither did she. Alina chuckled under her breath. I've never seen her speechless before. There was a long pause before she said what I knew she had been holding in. "Did she cheat on you, Dad?" I didn't lie. "Yes." Alina didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just exhaled slowly, as if a puzzle she'd been trying to solve for years had finally clicked into place. "I figured," she said, the way she'd always talk about loyalty but never actually show it. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry, baby. I wanted to protect you from all of this for as long as I could." She looked up. "You didn't protect me. You respected me. There's a difference." That hit deeper than I expected. For the next few days, Rachel tried to save face. She posted a carefully worded message on social media about a difficult but necessary transition and how life sometimes leads us to unexpected paths. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She tried calling once, then twice, and left a message asking if we could meet. But I didn't return those either. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't see the point in re-entering a room that had already burned down. Legally, things moved fast. My lawyer had already begun filing the necessary paperwork, and with the proof of infidelity and the documentation I'd quietly gathered over the past year, Rachel's claims to joint assets crumbled before they could even be raised. She was offered a modest settlement, one she begrudgingly accepted. But the house, the trust for Alina, the business accounts, all of it remained with me. Some of Rachel's friends reached out to check in. One even had the gall to say, "I always thought you deserved better, Dan." I thanked them politely but kept my distance. I wasn't interested in sympathy or alliances. I just wanted space, peace, and I finally had it. The week after the graduation, Alina and I took a short trip, just the two of us. A father-daughter getaway we had talked about for years but never made time for. We hiked, watched old movies in our hotel room, and stayed up one night just talking until nearly 3 a.m. No masks. No tension. Just honesty. She told me about her plans for grad school, her worries about relationships, her fear that she'd become like her mother. I told her she wouldn't, because she already had one thing her mother never valued, self-awareness. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just a provider or a fixture in someone else's performance. I was a father. A present one. A steady one. One who had finally chosen truth over illusion. As we returned home, I stood on the porch and looked at the house that had once held so much silence. It still stood, solid and familiar, but it no longer felt like a stage. It felt like mine. No ghosts of faked smiles. No tension hanging in the air. Just walls that echoed only what I allowed inside. Rachel never returned. She moved in with a friend temporarily, and eventually, I heard she had gone back to that man, the one from the hotel videos. I felt nothing. Not hate. Not victory. Just Closure. She had chosen her path, and I had reclaimed mine. It's strange how a single day, a single moment, even, can split your life in two. Before and after, pretending and honest, bound and free. And on that graduation stage, in front of hundreds, I didn't just congratulate my daughter. I freed myself. You've just heard how one man turned public humiliation into poetic justice. If this story moved you, inspired you, or left you stunned, make sure to subscribe and stay with us. There are more stories coming, real, raw, and unapologetically powerful. Join the Burnt Bridges Stories family, where the truth always finds a voice.